The red and blue lights sliced across my private pond like a heartbeat about to flatline. 3 HOA security trucks sat parked at the edge, their headlights carving white knives through the darkness and lighting up the floating observation ring that hovered above the water like some sci-fi mistake the neighborhood association never approved. Victoria Langford stood on the shore in her signature pastel blue power suit, still somehow wrinkle-free at 3 a.m., directing 2 divers like she was hosting a garden club meeting instead of committing a felony. "Place the charges under the central turbine housing," she hissed into her radio, voice dripping with that fake polite Karen tone everyone in Emerald Grove Estates knew too well. "When this thing fails, we write it off as an unfortunate accident. By sunrise, Damien will be begging to sell." The divers slipped into the black water without a splash. On the bank, Victoria ended a call with her developer buddy and smiled the smile of a woman who'd spent 14 years turning a suburban paradise into her personal fiefdom. She never noticed the figure crouched in the shadows behind the command shed, tablet glowing faintly, recording every second of her masterpiece. I raised my phone, voice barely a whisper. "Shepard, they just planted explosives on federally funded green infrastructure. Activate protocol. It's time." Silence on the other end, then a low chuckle heavy with years of watching bureaucrats play God. "Damien, you sure? Once your identity drops, there's no going back." They crossed the line. Let the show begin. 5 days earlier, the world still looked deceptively peaceful. Dawn painted Emerald Grove Estates in that perfect California glow, manicured lawns, identical beige fences, and zero tolerance for anything that didn't scream. We all agreed on this shade of beige. My 3-acre lot sat at the back, the one everyone whispered about because I dared to build something useful instead of another putting green. The Nexus Pond shimmered like a jewel nobody had asked for. A man-made retention basin I'd engineered with patented hybrid solar hydro tech. Floating in the middle was the Aquaforge ring, 40 feet of reinforced glass and monitoring gear that let me watch the microturbine spinning below, generating clean power for my house and enough surplus to light half the block if the HOA ever let me share it. The whole setup was worth $2.8 million in materials and patents alone. Federal Green Energy Pilot Program. Inspected, permitted, and completely legal. Which is exactly why Victoria Langford hated it. I was inside the lakeside shed, my command center, comparing flowcharts when my assistant Corbin burst in with 2 coffees. "Boss, the HOA just dropped another violation notice. This one's for visual pollution caused by reflective water surface. They're fining you $500 a day until you drain it." I didn't even look up. "Add it to the collection." Corbin hesitated. "Damien, the neighbors are talking. Calling you the eccentric recluse again. Saying the turbines are a safety hazard to kids who don't even have access to your property." I finally turned. "Let them talk. They've been calling me that since I refused to paint my mailbox the approved soft taupe." That afternoon Victoria arrived like royalty descending on peasants. 3 white SUVs with gold HOA logos rolled up my driveway. She stepped out in heels that clicked like countdown timers, silver hair in a razor-sharp bob, cream Hermes bag swinging like a threat. Gideon Black, her 6'4" security muscle, loomed behind her like a walking lawsuit waiting to happen. "Mr. Holt," she cooed, smile never reaching her eyes. "At last we meet properly. I'm Victoria Langford, president of the Emerald Grove Homeowners Association. We've sent you 7 notices in 3 weeks. I assume you've been busy." I stayed on the elevated deck of the ring, looking down at her the way she hated being looked down on. "Busy keeping my property compliant with actual federal law, yes. Something your little rulebook doesn't cover." Her laugh tinkled like broken glass. "Oh, darling, safety concerns. Environmental impact. Fairness. One man hogging all this power generation while the rest of us pay Everbright $400 a month? It just doesn't feel neighborly." "Neighborly," I repeated, tasting the word like spoiled milk. "Is that what you call flying drones over my fence and photographing my ring without permission?" Gideon smirked and held up a tablet showing drone footage. Victoria's smile tightened. "Community oversight, Mr. Holt. For everyone's benefit. Now, the board has requested you cease operations for 60 days pending a safety review. Signed by me and the county water commissioner, my brother-in-law, in case you were wondering. I didn't open the envelope she offered. This pond is a federally funded prototype. Your HOA covenant stops at my front gate when it comes to green infrastructure grants. She leaned in, voice sweet enough to rot teeth. Everything can change, dear. Cooperate or things might get unpleasant. They drove off in their little convoy, leaving tire marks on my grass that would probably earn me another fine. I watched the dust settle and muttered to the empty air. Lady, you have no idea who you're poking. That night I sat in the shed surrounded by glowing monitors. Corporate filings for Langford Luxury Developments LLC. A shell company founded right after I moved in. 6 neighboring properties sold in the last 18 months at 30% below market after months of HOA harassment. All now owned by the same Delaware paper trail. Then the email that should never have existed. Forwarded by accident from the county commissioner to a public inbox. Victoria, Apex Developments confirms if the Nexus Pond tech is neutralized by Q3, they'll pay $2.8 million for the lot plus patents. Your cut $700,000, mine $250,000. Gideon will handle the mechanical failure. I leaned back, coffee gone cold. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted the patents that could power entire neighborhoods for pennies. And they were willing to blow up my life to get them. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Perfect. Let them keep digging. The next morning I took a walk along the shoreline path toward the little cottage at the edge of the old Whitaker property. Smoke curled from the chimney even though it was warm. On the porch sat Opal Whitaker 74, sharp as broken glass, the woman the HOA had quietly removed from the board 3 years ago for asking too many questions about consulting fees. She didn't look up from her book. Took you long enough, Mr. Holt. I stopped at the steps. You knew. I taught environmental engineering at Caltech for 30 years. That pond of yours is a masterpiece. And I know exactly what Victoria wants because she did the same number on 6 families before you. Opal reached into a drawer and produced a USB drive. 7 years of closed session minutes. Every bribe, every threat, every fake safety study. I copied it all before they kicked me out. I weighed the drive in my palm. You held this for 3 years. I'm old and alone. Evidence without teeth is just paper. But you, she finally met my eyes. You're not ordinary. Where do you really come from before you played the quiet homeowner? I pocketed the drive. Let's just say I used to inspect things a lot bigger than backyard ponds. Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker. That Wednesday the community center was standing room only. Victoria stood at the head table in her pastel armor, projector showing pictures of flooded neighborhoods. $2.8 million of untested technology sitting right next to your children's playgrounds, she announced, voice trembling with practiced concern. One structural failure and this entire valley becomes a swimming pool. From the back row I stood. The room went dead quiet. Interesting, I said calmly. Because the last federal inspection, page 4, signed by a senior engineer with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, called the Aquaforge ring completely safe. You can read it yourself. Oh, and Mrs. Langford. Care to explain why Langford Luxury Developments just bought 6 surrounding lots after your board drove the owners into bankruptcy? Victoria's smile cracked like cheap foundation. This is a community meeting, not an interrogation. I stepped forward. Then why does it feel like one? Behind me, whispers turned into murmurs. For the first time in 14 years, Victoria Langford looked small. The next 3 days were textbook escalation, HOA style. Day 1. Red spray paint across my solar array screaming, drain the pond. Each letter 3 feet tall. I photographed everything, smiled, and saved the footage. Day 2. The main power cable to the shed cut clean with professional tools. 6 hours of blackout before backups kicked in. Day 3. Corbin ran in pale as milk. Hidden cams under the ring caught 2 divers at 3 a.m. attaching something to the turbine housing. I watched the footage once, twice. Then activated the enhanced stream that fed straight to federal servers. Corbin, I said quietly, Go home before 10 tonight. And trust me. He nodded, confused but loyal. 2 days later, I sat in the corner cafe reading the commissioner's damning email when a young woman slid into my booth without asking. Riley Hayes, ProPublica reporter, eyes sharp. I've been tracking Apex developments for 2 years. Same playbook in 3 states. You have proof. I slid a redacted copy across the table. Not enough for prison yet. Stick around. Something newsworthy is coming. That evening I discovered the final piece. Someone had tried to access my patent files remotely using stolen core credentials. I made one quiet call. Shepard. They just crossed the federal line. The trap was set. At 8 p.m. My truck pulled out of the driveway, headlights sweeping the road like I was leaving for the weekend. The shed went dark. The property looked abandoned. At 11:33 HOA trucks rolled in with lights off. Gideon barked orders. Divers hit the water with waterproof bags. Victoria stepped out of her Mercedes, suit still perfect, phone to ear. Darling, by morning Damien's precious ring will be scrap metal. He'll sell for pennies. In the shadows I watched every move on my tablet. When the divers surfaced and the charges were attached, I stepped into the headlights. Gideon's hand flew to his holster. You're not supposed to be here. Victoria spun, composure cracking for the first time. Mr. Holt, we're simply performing emergency maintenance as requested by your brother-in-law who's about to lose his job? I held up the tablet. The screen showed live underwater feed charges clearly visible, and the header that made Gideon freeze, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Criminal Investigations Division. Live stream active. DOJ receiving station. Victoria's laugh came out high and thin. This is a misunderstanding. I never authorized explosives. I pulled my ID card from my jacket, gold border, eagle emblem. Special Agent Damien Holt, Corps Dam Safety Division. 14 years inspecting critical infrastructure. And you just tried to blow up a federally protected prototype. Helicopter rotors thundered overhead. Black SUVs crashed the gate. Red and blue lights turned night into day. Victoria's pastel suit finally got its first wrinkle as the cuffs clicked. I'm the HOA president. I have connections. The agent didn't even blink. Your brother-in-law's being arrested right now. Enjoy federal prison, ma'am. The next 48 hours were a beautiful avalanche of karma. Federal agents raided Victoria's McMansion at dawn. Her husband stood on the porch in boxers, crying into his robe while she was led away, still demanding her pearl-clutching rights. Gideon Black hit the ground so hard his tactical vest popped a seam. The divers, the tech guy who'd wiped footage, all of them cuffed before they could say, it was just orders. Apex Developments issued a panic statement claiming rogue actors. Nobody bought it. Their stock dropped 12% by lunch. The biggest shock came when the county commissioner was perp-walked out of his office in cuffs. His career ended on the evening news. Riley Hayes' article dropped that night. The Emerald Grove Conspiracy. How an HOA Karen tried to steal America's next green tech breakthrough. 2.7 million views in 24 hours. 1 month later, the community center looked completely different. Fluorescent lights still buzzed, but the energy had flipped. Opal Whitaker stood at the head table in a purple cardigan, smiling like she'd waited 3 years to do it. The Emerald Grove Homeowners Association is officially dissolved, she announced to thunderous applause. A new transparent council with elected members and actual bylaws will take its place. She looked straight at me in the back row. And we owe it to one man who didn't just protect his pond. He protected every single family here from the same bully who'd been bleeding us dry for years. I nodded once, uncomfortable with the attention, but the families who'd been forced to sell below market started lining up to shake my hand. One older man, tears in his eyes, gripped my palm hard. My dad lost our house because of her fines. Died 6 months later. I always thought it was just stress. I held the handshake. The people who did that to him are paying now. That's not hope. That's fact. The final legal proceedings took 6 more months. Victoria Langford pleaded guilty to everything. Sabotage of federal infrastructure, conspiracy, wire fraud, extortion. The judge looked her dead in the eye during sentencing. You used your position to terrorize the very neighbors you swore to protect. You authorized explosives on critical green infrastructure for personal profit. The court sentences you to 24 years in federal prison. Her pastel blue suit, the same one she'd worn to every meeting like armor, looked suddenly cheap and gray under the courtroom lights. Gideon got 18. The rest of the crew got 5 to 12 depending on how enthusiastically they'd followed orders. The commissioner got 12 and a lifetime ban from public office. The neighborhood began to heal. New council meetings actually listened. No more fines for offensive flower colors. No more midnight drone surveillance. Families who'd lost homes started civil suits and won. 4 repurchased their properties. 2 moved on with settlement money and lighter hearts. Opal visited every Sunday afternoon, drinking tea on the Aquaforge ring and laughing about the old days before Victoria poisoned everything. Corbin got promoted and now ran daily operations, finally understanding that courage isn't loud. It's patient. Riley won a journalism award and thanked her mysterious source in her acceptance speech. I watched the stream and allowed myself the smallest smile. On the 1-year anniversary, I stood alone on the ring as the sun set, solar panels catching the last gold light and throwing it back like a promise kept. The turbines hummed beneath my feet, steady and clean, exactly as designed. People still asked why I waited. Why I let Victoria dig her own grave instead of stopping her at the first fine. The answer was simple. Water never lies. It finds every crack. It builds pressure slowly, patiently, until even the strongest dam crumbles under its own weight. I didn't push Victoria Langford. I simply let her keep pushing until the entire rotten structure she built collapsed on top of her. Some people build empires on fear, on fines, on the belief that rules only apply to everyone else. But time and truth always find the leaks. The last light faded. The ring lights came on softly, protecting what mattered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Maybe a new Karen somewhere else thinking she could control what she didn't understand. But tonight there was peace. The kind that comes from knowing you stood your ground without ever raising your voice. The kind Victoria would never understand from her prison cell. Thanks for staying until the end. Every like and subscribe helps these HOA stories reach more people fighting their own quiet battles. The seasons turned around the Nexus pond. Snow dusted the solar panels and melted instantly. The pond froze at the edges, but the turbines kept spinning underneath. Neighbors now waved instead of whispering. Kids asked if they could see the magic ring that made electricity. I watched it all from the shed, coffee warm in my hands, and realized the pond had become more than technology. It was proof that patience beats power every single time. Visitors started coming, engineers from Japan, officials from Germany, researchers documenting every bolt. Each one eventually asked the same question. How did you know the whole thing would collapse? My answer never changed. Water teaches you everything about pressure. It finds the cracks arrogance tries to hide. It never stops. It never forgives weak foundations. If you understand water, you understand that corrupt systems carry the seeds of their own destruction. You just have to wait for the seeds to grow. The 6 families won every civil suit. Victoria's remaining assets were liquidated and distributed. The new council passed a rule. Never again would one person control the narrative. And on quiet evenings when the ring glowed softly over the water, I thought about the question I still get in the comments. So tell me in the comments right now, was Victoria Langford the real villain here? Or is the entire HOA system designed from the ground up to turn normal neighbors into tyrants who think they own your life? Drop your honest answer below. Was I wrong to let her plant those explosives just to catch her red-handed, or was that the only way justice could finally win? I'm reading every single one. Because the next HOA Karen might be closer than you think.